When buying a modular power supply from Corsair, you should not worry about the amount of cables you will find in the box. You'll get all the different combinations of cables you could ever wish for. It can be a little bit overwhelming and intimidating at first, but do not worry, we only need 4 cables for our build. First, the Atx Power Cable, which will supply power to our motherboard. Then will come the 8-pin PSU cable, which will be there to give this extra juice to our processor. SATA Power Cable for our 140mm fans that we installed earlier with the water cooling system. And finally, our fourth and last power cable, which will give juice to our 1080 GTX GPU. Let's take a closer look to those 4 cables we will be working with. First, our cable ATX 24 pins. This is a plug that will go directly to the PSU, and that is the one which will plug in the motherboard. You will see that our CPU cable is a little tricky to install because the water cooling system is right in front of the plug on the motherboard. But luckily this is the only tricky one we will have. Now those 2 cables will not be plugged in directly into the motherboard. That one, for example, will be plugged in onto the Nvidia card itself, which is quite easy. And we will connect the other end of this cable to the plug we left earlier on when we installed the water cooling system. Now that we've seen where those 4 cables will connect on the PSU, let's take a look on where they will end up on the board and the different elements we have to power. We will plug our 24-pin ATX right here, our 8-pin CPU connector down on the left. You can see what I was talking about when I was referring to a tricky position. It is right behind the 2 water cooler rigid tubes. So we will have to be a little bit careful, but nothing to worry about. Next come our GPU in orange on top of your screen. And finally the water cooling system, 2 140mm fans that we left unplugged after the initial installation of the water cooling head. Alright, I know it's a lot to take in, but we're done with this, so now we're just gonna go ahead and start plugging the plugs. Okay, there's really nothing to it. We're just gonna go ahead and plug in the ATX 24 pin. As we saw with all the plugs during the installation, they have only one direction in which you can insert them. If you have any kind of resistance, just turn them around and it should fit right in. Let's go ahead with our 8-pin CPU plug. See how easy it fits in? I barely have to touch it, and that's how it should feel. And next, our 8-pin GPU plug. That is a plug which will power the Nvidia 1080 GTX. And finally, the power SATA cable which will operate the 2 140mm fans of the water cooling system. So once all our power cables are plugged in the PSU, the best way to deal with them is to throw them on the other side of the casing. And the best way to do that is to use one of those rather large holes who are designed for that effect. And now we are going to do some light cable management. We're going to go on the other side of the casing and we will see how we are to actually connect those cables to the motherboard and the different elements. So first we are going to take our ATX cable and send it back on the front side of our casing using the second level cable hole. Now the turn of the CPU cable, we're going to throw it on the corner right of our back panel and just place it next to its plug on the motherboard. And now comes the turn of our GPU cable. So we're going to place it as the 2 first cables on the front side of our casing and use the first level hole to that effect. Our fourth cable, the SATA power cable, will stay behind the case. We're not going to transfer it in front like the other 3 cables. No, instead we are just going to bring back the power SATA plug attached to the water pump that we left unplugged when we were initially installing the water pump cooler system. And now we can just go ahead and match those plugs together. And like any other plugs in our installation, there is a directions to them, so just watch out for it. Alright, so let's take a look at our front panel and start by connecting the ATX power cable to the motherboard. You will see that this 24-pin cable comes in two pieces to accommodate smaller motherboards. So you just need to hold those two plugs close to another and push it in the 24-pin plug onto the motherboard. Once you hear a little click, you know that you've done it right. The same with the CPU cable on top left, and as I promised, it's a little difficult. But no matter what the difficulty, just make sure to go gentle and not to push things too hard. And alright, our final cable, and that will be the GPU Nvidia 8-pin cable. Again, the cable could be divided in two different parts, 3-pin and 2-pin. Just put them together and plug them right in the plug. And that's it, you are one plug away to your electrical outlet. And without any further ado, let's see if that thing works.